Good morning, boys and girls. I have a new story for you today. This one is called Make Way for Ducklings by Robert McCloskey, and it's a Caldecott Award-winning book. So I didn't have anything with chicks, but I do have some ducklings. Okay, and on this page it shows the eggs, which we're all familiar with, and then the little ducklings coming out of the eggs at the bottom. It just starts off and there's a little crack. Remember when we've all seen the little cracks, and then they come out. Okay. Mr. and Mrs. Mallard were looking for a place to live, but every time Mr. Mallard saw what looked like a nice place, Mrs. Mallard said it was no good. There were sure to be foxes in the woods or turtles in the water, and she was not going to raise a family where there might be foxes or turtles. So they flew on and on. Why do you think there can't be foxes or turtles? When they got to Boston, they felt too tired to fly any further. There was a nice pond in the public garden with a little island on it, the very place to spend the night, quacked Mr. Mallard. So down they flapped. Okay, and this is Mr. Mallard, and this is Mrs. Mallard, and they're looking at this little island down here. The next morning, they fished for their breakfast in the mud at the bottom of the pond, but they didn't find much. Well, if you can see, if you've ever seen ducks in a pond, when they're looking for food, they go under the water, they put their heads under, and their little tails stick up like that. Just as they were getting ready to start on their way, a strange, enormous bird came by. It was pushing a boat full of people, and there was a man sitting on its back. "Good morning," quacked Mr. Mallard, being polite. But the big bird was too proud to answer. But the people on the boat threw peanuts into the water, so the Mallards followed them all around the pond and got another breakfast, better than the first. So they're saying this big bird here wouldn't talk to them, probably because it's not really a bird, is it? It's part of a boat. It's a big swan on a boat. But it's not alive. They don't know that, though. "I like this place," said Mrs. Mallard as they climbed out onto the bank and waddled along. "Why don't we build a nest and raise our ducklings right in this pond? There are no foxes and no turtles, and the people feed us peanuts. What could be better?" "Good," said Mr. Mallard, delighted that at last Mrs. Mallard had found a place that suited her. "But," when there's a but, it's never good news, is it? So here's the ducks talking. They're all happy. But let's see what's coming. Oh boy. "Look out," squawked Mrs. Mallard, all of a dither. "You'll get run over." And when she got her breath, she added, "This is no place for babies. With all those horrid things rushing about, we'll have to look somewhere else." Well, so they thought they found a good place, but if they can't be around bicycles like that, they would get hurt, especially little babies. So they flew over Beacon Hill and around the State House, but there's no place there. They looked into Louisburg Square, but there was no water to swim in. Then they flew over the Charles River. "This is better," quacked Mr. Mallard. "That island looks like a nice quiet place, and it's only a little away from the public garden." "Yes," said Mrs. Mallard, remembering the peanuts. "That looks like just the right place to hatch ducklings." So see down here, there's a little island, and it's very quiet. There's no people around. So they chose a cozy spot among the bushes near the water and settled down to build their nest. And only just in time, for now they were beginning to molt. All their old wing feathers started to drop out, and they would not be able to fly again until the new ones grew in. So just like other animals who get ready for the winter or for the seasons changing, so do ducks. Their feathers fall out, and then they can't fly. They can still swim and they can walk, but they have to wait for new feathers to come in. So they found it just in time. But of course they could swim, and one day they swam over to the park on the riverbank, and there they met a policeman called Michael. Michael fed them peanuts, and after that the Mallards called on Michael every day. So this is the policeman named Michael, and he's giving them peanuts. See down here, they're eating the peanuts. After Mrs. Mallard had laid 8 eggs in the nest, she couldn't go to visit Michael anymore because she had to sit on the eggs and keep them warm. She moved off the nest only to get a drink of water or to have her lunch or to count the eggs and make sure they were all there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's 8 eggs in the nest. But see, she has to sit on them and keep them warm. We had an incubator in the classroom which kept them warm. But if we didn't have an incubator, I don't know if our eggs would have hatched. They need to stay warm till they're ready. One day the ducklings hatched out. First came Jack, then Knack, then Lack, then Mack and Knack and Ack and Pack and Quack. Mr. and Mrs. Mallard were bursting with pride. It was great responsibility taking care of so many ducklings and keeping them very busy. So look at that. Jack, Cack, Lack, Mack, Knack, Ack, Pack, and Quack. If you notice, look at the letters of the alphabet. J, K, L, M, N, O, P, and Q. One day, Mr. Mallard decided he'd like to take a trip to see what the rest of the river was like further on. So off he set. "I'll meet you in a week in the public garden," he cracked over his shoulder. "Take good care of the ducklings." "Don't you worry," said Mrs. Mallard. "I know all about bringing up children." And she did. Probably because these ones started with the letter J. So I think that she probably had A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, and I before that. So she does know how to raise ducklings. She taught them how to swim and dive. She taught them how to walk in a line and to come when they were called and to keep a safe distance from bikes and scooters and other things with wheels. Right? She told them about dangerous things. When at least she felt perfectly satisfied with them, she said one morning, "Come along, children, follow me." Before you could wink an eyelash, we have Jack, Cack, Lack, Mack, wait a minute, Knack, Ack, Pack, and Quack fell into line, just as they had been taught. Mrs. Mallard led the way in the water, and they swam behind her to the opposite bank. See how nice and straight line they're in? They all listen to their mama. Then they waded ashore and waddled along till they came to the highway. Look at, there's cars up here. Mrs. Mallard stepped out to cross the road. Honk, honk went the horns on the speeding cars. Quack went Mrs. Mallard as she tumbled back again. Quack, 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 quack went Jack, Cack, Lack, Mack, Knack, Ack, Pack, and Quack. Just as loud as their little crackers could crack, the cars kept speeding by and honking, and Mrs. Mallard and the ducklings kept right on crack, crack, cracking. So see, we got quacks and honks and little birds, little ducklings are cracking, everybody's cracking. She warned them about skateboards and bicycles, but they didn't really think about cars, did they? They made such a noise that Michael came running, waving his arms and blowing his whistle. Remember who Michael is, right? Look at all the noise they're making. Quack, quack, honk, honk. And here's Mama with the little babies. Can you see them? He planted himself in the center of the road, raised one hand to stop the traffic, and then beckoned with the other, the way policemen do, for Mrs. Mallard to cross over. So he stopped the traffic so the cars could cross the street, or the ducks can cross the street and not get hit by a car. And then you can see after they cross, they're walking down the sidewalk. It's kind of hard to see, but as soon as Mr. and Mrs. Mallard and the ducklings were safe on the other side and on their way down Mount Vernon Street, Michael rushed back to his police booth. He called Clancy at the headquarters and said, "There's a family of ducks walking down the street." Clancy said, "A family of what? Ducks?" yelled Michael. "Send a police car, quick." So Michael's looking out for the ducks. He's calling ahead so that they know if they come to another road like that with all the cars, they won't get hurt. Meanwhile, Mrs. Mallard had reached the corner bookshop and turned onto Charles Street with Jack, Cack, Lack, Mack, Knack, Ack, Pack, and Quack all marching in a line behind her. Here they are, walking up the street. You notice the people are looking. Look at, they're all looking out at them. Like, oh, how cute. Look at the ducks walking down the road. Everyone stared. An old lady from Beacon Hill said, "Isn't it amazing?" And the man who swept the street said, "Well, now, ain't that nice?" And when Mrs. Mallard heard them, she was so proud she tipped her nose in the air and walked along with an extra swing in her waddle. So look, she's very proud mama. Very proud that all her little ducklings are following in a row like they're supposed to. When they came to the corner of Beacon Street, there was the police car with 4 policemen that Clancy had sent from headquarters. The policemen held back the traffic, so Mrs. Mallard and the ducklings could march across the street. Here they are up here. You can see, I know it's hard because of the colors of the book. But they held all the traffic back so the ducks could safely cross. They marched right onto the public garden. See them coming up. And that was the first park they went to. Remember the public garden? Inside the gate, they turned around to say thank you to the policemen. The policemen smiled and waved goodbye. When they reached the pond and swam across to the little island, there was Mr. Mallard waiting for them just as he had promised. See, they made it, and they're going to that little island. Mr. Mallard is way over there all by himself. And here's Mama with the babies. The ducklings liked the new island so much that they decided to live there all day long. They followed the swan boats and ate peanuts. And as you can see, here's the big swan boat, and here's the duck, and all the little ducklings following the boat. And when night falls, they swim to their little island and go to sleep. That was the very first little island they found, and now they're old enough to know about the bicycles, and they know how to stay safe. And I think that is the end. Yep, the end. So that was Make Way for Ducklings, and I hope you enjoyed it. Bye.